Today is the second week of the first series of what we call here at RiverTree the Jesus season, which is the period of time between Christmas, the beginning of Jesus' life, and Good Friday and Easter, the end and resurrection of his earthly life, during which time, which is usually 3 or 4 months, we focus exclusively on the person of Jesus, who he was, what he taught, his kingdom, etc. The first series of the Jesus season 2016 is simply entitled, Come to Jesus. All it is us exploring together episodes from the gospel that you will be reading through this Jesus season, the Gospel of Luke, in which people sought Jesus out. And we want to see why. What was it that caused them to take the initiative to drop their normal life and their normal routine and seek out Jesus? Because the truth is, for 2,000 years now, human beings like you and I have been seeking Jesus for the same reasons. He is a singular figure, a compelling figure that Christians and non-Christians alike can't seem to get away from. I don't know that I've ever heard the idea of human beings for the last 2,000 years seeking out Jesus and what he was all about better expressed than in this quote that really would be a great summary for the intent or the goal of the entire series. If you like the current Pope, Pope Francis, then you would like this guy, who is Pope John Paul II. He said this to a gathering of 100,000 Catholic youth about seeking Jesus. He said to them as his spiritual counsel to them as their pastor, quote, "It is Jesus that you seek when you dream of happiness. He is waiting for you when nothing else you find satisfies you. He is the beauty to which you are so attracted. It is he who provoked you with that thirst for fullness that will not let you settle for compromise. It is he who urges you to shed the masks of a false life. It is he who reads in your heart your most genuine choices, the choices that others sometimes try to stifle. It is Jesus who stirs in you the desire to do something great with your lives, the will to follow an ideal, the refusal to allow yourselves to be ground down by mediocrity, the courage to commit yourselves humbly and patiently to improving yourselves and your society, making the world a more humane and more fraternal and more loving place. It is Jesus that you seek." Today, we're going to look at an episode late in the Gospel of Luke. This is an episode that will be like a lot of others you run across in the Gospel of Luke, with some exceptions. This is a miracle story. Now, if the subject of miracles in the Bible interests you, or if you struggle with them and don't know how a 21st century person can believe in such things, this week online on our Facebook page, etc., I'll post a message from last year's Jesus season that dealt with all that miracle stuff and the credibility of miracles. Today we just want to deal with the story because the story is powerful enough. This is the story of Jesus healing 10 lepers. We're going to take this story in 2 halves because it comes to us in this paragraph in Luke 17 in 2 halves. Here's the first half. Late in Jesus' life, as he's headed or pointed toward Jerusalem, knowing that he will soon die at the hands of the Jewish leaders and the Roman authorities, we are told that he passes through the region between Samaria and Galilee, which is northern Israel. Most Jewish people didn't go this way. Samaria was off limits. It was the wrong side of the tracks. Frankly, it was a lot worse than that. It would be like going through a region filled with your nation's enemies, people that you viewed to be traitors to your race and your country. That's who Samaritans were to the Jewish people in Jesus' day. And yet Jesus, as he would often do, did not mind going straight through Samaria to get to southern Israel. Again, most Jewish people would never think of doing this. And so, as he enters one of these villages in Samaria, he is approached by 10 lepers, and they kept their distance. Let's pause for a minute. Leprosy in the first century AD world. There is probably no word for an ancient Israelite or even Roman citizen that would have frightened them more than leprosy. It's worse than the word cancer for you, or AIDS. Here's what would have happened to somebody in the first century world. They would have been going about their life, regardless of class, regardless of job, regardless of setting. And somebody, either themselves or someone in their family or someone in their workplace, would have noticed a spot on their hands typically, or their feet or legs, that would have begun to turn gray. Maybe an ulcer would have appeared. And instantly that person's life would have radically changed. Instantly that person would have lost their entire family and their entire community. They would have been placed outside of their city, outside of their town, outside of their village in this case, to live in what would effectively be a tent town or a shanty town. They would have lived out there in the cold and the heat in a lean-to. And for the rest of their lives, the only people that they could have direct contact with would be other lepers. Yes, maybe their family would bring them food, but they couldn't get close. Maybe the village would be generous to these people and would keep them alive with donations, but the only people they would laugh with, they would cry with, that would care about them for the rest of their lives were the other people afflicted with this disease. And there you live on the outskirts of town, watching the town lights night after night. There you live on the outskirts of town, listening to the laughter of the people that you used to call your friends for years while this disease ran its course. There you sit on the outside of town, waiting to die while everybody else goes on with their lives. And they hear that Jesus is coming. And somehow these people, who everybody, including themselves, left for dead, have a spark of hope inside. Maybe they've heard the wild stories about this rabbi and what he does for people like them. And so they get up, and for the first time since they've gotten the disease, they think, maybe somebody can do something. The doctors are powerless. My family is powerless. But maybe this guy can do something. And so they approach Jesus on the outside of the town. Remember, they're not let in town at all. So this is somewhere on a road leading up to this village. And Luke tells us they kept their distance. Yep, you know why? They had to. They weren't allowed close to anybody. So you need to imagine that these 10 leopards are way over there on that side of the gym. And they are yelling out to Jesus, waving their hands like this, trying to get his attention. Jesus, stop. Jesus, come see us. Jesus, will you be the one person, since we contracted this disease, who will come within 100 yards of us, 200 yards of us, who will touch us, who will speak to us from a close proximity. They hope that Jesus can be the answer to the impossible. And they cry out to Jesus and say, Jesus, have mercy on us. And when he saw them, he said, go, show yourselves to the priests. And they went, and they were made clean. Why go to the priests? Because they couldn't re-enter society in that time, in that place, in that culture without a priest's approval. Not a doctor. A priest had to say, yeah, you're okay. You're cured. You may re-enter the life that you completely lost. Jesus said, go to the people who can let you have your life back. And oh, by the way, some of Jesus' chief enemies in his life and times in the Gospels were the priests, the Jewish leaders. So he said, go to the people who like me the least, who are threatened by me the most, and show them what I've done for you. And on their way to the priests, we are told, they were healed. They were made clean. Here's the thing about our world, 2,000 years later. Leprosy really doesn't exist anymore. According to several online World Health organizations, in the last couple of years, we average about 250,000 cases of leprosy per year across the globe. And now it's also 100% treatable if it's caught early enough. So how is this story relevant to you and I, who live in a very different time, much more advanced medically? What would leprosy look like in our world? We have to back away and ask, what did it do in their world? What was it like in their world? Leprosy was the impossible in their world. It was the insurmountable in their world. It was something that happened to somebody that they or no one else could fix. Do you know of things like that in your world? But remember what I told you about the life of a leper. When someone got leprosy, not only was it impossible for them to fix or to be healed from, but also it was isolating. It was estranging. It was alienating. They lost everybody except other people like them who were sick when they contracted this disease. Do you know of things that happen to people that cause them to be isolated from others? Others they may love, others they may care about. Do you know of things that occur to people that cause them to be alienated from the people they thought that cared about them the most? And the last thing that leprosy was in that ancient world, in Jesus' world, is it was frightening. It was one of the most frightening words. It was one of the most frightening circumstances that any person then could have encountered. It was fearful. There is nothing that would have made someone so scared as the word leprosy. Do you know of things that happen to people that don't just fill them with terror, but fill those around them with terror? Let me suggest some things, and then you're going to do a little thinking on this too. Some of you may be old enough to remember the basketball player Magic Johnson. I am a Los Angeles Lakers fan growing up in California. Don't hate me. I know there's a lot of Pistons fans in the room. He is from Michigan State. Thank you. That's true. So there, I redeemed myself. You remember what happened to Magic Johnson? Magic Johnson got HIV back in the early 90s. This is when we didn't understand HIV and AIDS particularly well. After he contracted the disease and retired for a while, he came back and played one more season. When he played that last season, because he's such a fan favorite and etc., he was voted to play in the All-Star game. And several very well-known players in the NBA said, yeah, we can't play because we don't want him sweating on us. We don't want him touching us. We don't want anywhere near him. And it was quite a big deal. Google it if you don't believe me. That would be an example of when you've seen our society respond to something in a way that they would have responded to leprosy. But see, it's not just physical illness. I think that's the easiest thing to run to, right? There are still diagnoses that you and I and our loved ones can receive that are the equivalent of leprosy. When you hear the word from your doctor or the phrase from your doctor, pancreatic cancer, yeah, it's kind of leprosy because there is such a small survival rate for that particular kind of cancer. Inoperable brain tumor. Yeah, that's a kind of leprosy too. But see, it's bigger than physiological illness if you understand everything that happened. I think we've come far enough as a culture that anybody who has a mild case of depression or anxiety and happens to take a pill every day for it doesn't feel the stigma that maybe you did 10 years ago. But people with significant mental illness, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, people who have severe depression and lose jobs because of it, or can't get up in the morning because of it, or are suicidal because of it, ask them if it feels like leprosy. And the answer will be sometimes yes, because it does all of those things. It seems impossible. It alienates them from the people they love. People don't know what to make of them anymore, and they keep their distance. It frightens people because you don't understand it. People losing jobs and falling a class or two, a socioeconomic rung or two, not just for a little while, but for a prolonged period of time, is one of the ways you see leprosy show up in America. Really. You know how I know that? Because of what it does. Ask anybody who's lost a job and is tumbled into the lower class. Ask them what happens. They lose their friends. They lose their house. They lose others' opinion of them. They are no longer as highly regarded at church. They would have been put up for the name of elder or deacon before. Not anymore. Simply because they're poor. Simply because they lost a job 2 years ago and can't find another that provides for their family. And so now they work 3 jobs, and their spouse works 2. And they have a hard time taking care of their kids. And for them, their poverty feels like leprosy. And if we're not careful, those of us who are not similarly afflicted treat them the same way. Those of you who have experienced abuse in your past, you know what? Yeah, it can be like leprosy. You know how I know? Because it's like that. For you, it can seem impossible to get outside of. For you, it can seem insurmountable. The scars and the wounds that have left. But not only that, it fills you with fear and anybody who knows you with fear. If they know that you were abused, even if they love you, sometimes they worry about how that's affected you and how it will affect their behavior toward them. You know this. If you've experienced abuse, you've felt this from others. It alienates you. It gives you social anxiety. You're not sure who to trust anymore. Yep. Abuse is a modern version of leprosy. Let me suggest to you that everybody in the room, in their life, right now, today, can think of a modern example of leprosy. Maybe not in your life, but in the life of somebody in your circle, your friends, your family. It is the modern equivalent of leprosy because it fits those 3 characteristics right there. It's impossible. No one can seem to fix it. It causes people to be alienated or isolated, and it frightens the person who has it and the people around them. What's remarkable about these 10 lepers is that when they ran into their leprosy and Jesus showed up, they sought Jesus out with it. We don't often do that. Here's why. When you and I run into impossible things in our lives, ugly things in our lives, things we're ashamed of, things maybe we don't want to admit in public, we tend to have other reactions. One of our reactions is, well, this can't be fixed. We throw up our hands in the air and say, that's it. I'm done. This medical diagnosis will be the end of me. This mental health problem will be the end of me. This job loss and tumble into poverty will be the end of me, and it cannot be fixed. And so we despair. Or there are others among us who think, come hell or high water, I am going to fix this myself. I don't care what I have to do. I don't care how much more I have to go back to college and learn a different career. I am going to fix this myself. I don't care how much it costs me. I'm going to get the best medical care in any state in this country. I'm going to fix it myself. And that's okay to a point. And the point will be sometimes you're going to run into stuff you can't fix. And I don't know what that thing is going to be for you. And maybe others among us think, well, other people will help us. We're just going to throw ourselves on the benevolence of others and hope that the other people in our world who care for us and love us will help us fix this. And I think, like these 10 lepers, what you and I need to realize is sometimes, and it's scary to admit this, there are things you're going to run into in life, those impossible things, those alienating things, those fearful things that nobody can fix but Jesus, just like they knew. And instead of being afraid or ashamed of bringing them to him, you and I would be wise to do what they did, which is to come running and to tell him, this is my impossible thing. I can't fix it, and nobody else can. Can you? Can you, Jesus, fix this for me? I want you to pause right now, right here in the middle of the message. And on your chairs or at your tables, there are some yellow half slips. And I want you to take a minute or two, and I want you to use what I've talked about so far to identify the leprosy in your life. Now, it could be your life, or it could be the life of a family member, a close friend, as we like to say around here, using Jesus' word, a neighbor. How have you seen leprosy show up in your life, in the lives of others? What are the things that you're carrying around that seem insurmountable to you, that are frightening, make you almost panic because they're so scary? Or that isolate you from others, that alienate you from others because they don't understand what's going on with you. They don't get it. Would you take 30 seconds, 60 seconds? I want you to put pen to paper and write it down. Okay, what I want you to do is take that slip with you this week. And you may think of other things in your world before this message leaves your active memory. You can write that down later. Your job is to bring this to Jesus this week. That is all in the story the lepers did. They just brought it to Jesus. Your job is to actively, through prayer, bring it to Jesus every day. You can do that. You can make that choice. That, by the way, though, what we have covered so far is only half of the story. It is this half of the story that makes this particular episode unique among the miracle stories in the Gospels. So Jesus heals 10 lepers. And then we are told in the second half of the story that one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned around and praised God with a loud voice. And he knelt before Jesus and he thanked him. And that particular man was a Samaritan, the loathsome enemy of the Jewish people. And then Jesus asked him, hey, weren't there 10 guys who were healed or made clean? And the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner that no one would expect? Then Jesus said to him, get up and go on your way, for your faith has made you well. Does it surprise you? It does me, I will say to you, as a lover of the Bible and its narrative, and someone who appreciates the way that it tells stories like this. It surprises me that when those lepers were healed by Jesus, only one thought to turn around and come back and say thanks. Is that odd to you? What does that tell you about spiritual gratitude or thanks? The thanks that we owe to God Almighty for many things, certainly in this case, when he intervenes in impossible situations or alienating situations or fearful situations? What does it tell you? I guess I get it. I understand why the 9 guys or women didn't come back. They were overjoyed. Every step they take toward the priests, they think to themselves, what's going to happen? This rabbi, this amazing rabbi Jesus, told us to go to the priests, show ourselves, and we'd get our lives back. Will it work? And then it did. And they jump for joy, they yell with excitement, they faint in disbelief. And then what do you do first? Don't you run to your family? You run straight into the town. Or you run straight to the priest who will give you permission to go straight into the town, and you bang on the door of your family who hasn't seen you at their home in years because of this illness. Sure you do. That's what I do. I go kiss Heather and Eli and Shiloh and tell them Dad's home. Thanks to Jesus. I don't think to go back to him. It's not unlike my kids on Christmas morning, right? You hear from the grandparents before Christmas, hey, what do your kids want for Christmas? And so you do a little colluding on the side, and lo and behold, your kids are there on Christmas morning with Grandpa and Grandma in the room, and they open up their presents, and look, it's exactly what they wished for. Miracle! No, it took a lot of work, but miracle! And their head explodes. You watch the nuclear cloud form over their head, and they're jumping up and down for joy, and they're running around the house, and they're looking for a TV to plug the Xbox into, and the one thing they forget to do until you tug on their shirt tail and say, don't be that kid, is go thank Grandma and Grandpa. I guess I get it. Only one returned to say thanks. What this should tell you and what this should tell me is that gratitude doesn't come as natural to us as we think. It has to be intentional, and it has to be purposeful. And if you don't take the time to consciously do it, you may forget even about the big things, like your leprosy, your death sentence being cured. Go figure. So maybe you and I should learn from this great story in Luke 17 that we need to pay attention in our lives. And when God does little things for us, as he does on a daily or weekly basis, and he gives us some encouragement from a place that we didn't expect, or he gives us a gift in a way that we didn't anticipate, we need to pause in that moment, and before we run on and do anything else, before we call a friend, before we use that gift card, what we do is we pause. We bow our heart and our head, and we say, thank you, God. This is from you. I get that. And I'm going to do it right now so I don't forget. That's what it tells me about the attitude of gratitude. I want you to see something about this story. I want you to look at verse 19 that ends it. This is one of the things I hope you with me learn to love about some of the things you read about Jesus in the Gospels. Do you know the word enigmatic? It means it's inconclusive. It means you're not quite sure how to take it, and that's intentional because the writer, in this particular case, Luke, wants you to really wrestle with it. So here's the quote at the end of the episode in Luke 17. The 10 lepers approach Jesus, and they're cured as they head to the priests. One guy turns around and praises Jesus or thanks Jesus for what Jesus has done. And then Jesus says to the one guy who has come back, get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well. Here's what Luke wants you, the reader, to ask yourself. Who was made well in the story? Weren't all 10? Yeah. In a very big physical way, yeah, all 10 lepers were made well. However, holistically, spiritually, only one was. And it was the guy who received the biggest gift of his life and didn't run off to do something else, didn't run off to greet his family, didn't celebrate. He turned around and thanked Jesus. And Jesus says to that guy, your faith, unlike the other 9, whose bodies are whole and clean, your faith has made you well in a way that those 9 haven't experienced. Gratitude can do that. Spiritual thanks for what God does in our life can do that for you and for me. That's its power. You know what gratitude does? When you and I choose to be purposeful about it, when you and I look in our lives for things to be grateful for, things that God gives to us or sends our way or provides for us daily, weekly, you know what it does for us? It reminds you you're a finite, dependent being, and so am I. And you can't fix everything that comes your way. Not the A students in the room, not the people who earn $100,000 a year. Nope. Life is going to throw you a curveball so big you can't hit it. Life is going to come at you and surprise you or undermine you or pull the rug out from underneath you in a way at some point that you can't fix. It is far beyond your strength and ability. And at that point, you and I hope, have the wisdom and the faith to do what those lepers did, which is to reach out to the only one at that point who can help. And when he intervenes, we come back to him and say thanks. And when we do, we are telling the truth about how small sometimes we are in our own lives, how weak we can be in our own lives, how dependent upon him sometimes we are. Do not leave here with the illusion that you are under some obligation to fix everything you encounter that comes your way. I hope your first instinct is to drop to your knees and to ask God to do for you what you cannot do for yourselves, what no one else can do for you. And when you do, know in that moment of weakness, you are being truly human, truly Christian. Because as the great St. Paul said, it is in your weakness that you are strong. It is not when you're strong that you are at your best. The only leper who was made well was the one guy who turned around and said, thanks. Because he was rightly restored to a relationship with God built on faith and gratitude. Today, by the way, I love that art. I found that online and could not find the name of the artist. But that is a great original art piece about the story that we talked about today. The story of the 10 lepers who were healed and the one who was made well. Today, actually, I want to end the message in a different way. I want to take time together as a congregation, as a family of faith, to do what the one leper did, what he got right, and why he is the exemplary figure in that story. He said thanks. He was deliberate about it. He did it purposefully. So what I want us to do together today, to end, is I want us to share a little bit. I want us to share our leprosy stories. What were the times in your life when you faced something so big, so daunting, so isolating, or so frightening that you couldn't handle it? And at some point, maybe it was quick, maybe it was delayed, it doesn't matter. At some point, you reached out to God and said, I can't do this. Only you can. Will you help? and he did. I want you to say thanks today. I want us to say thanks today, like the one leper did. Let's take a few minutes and do that together. Candace, will you be my runner today with the mic?